deliberate upon. These people are supposed to be elected to be a ruling class, to be a political class, to dominate the society, to give a direction to people. The truth is we've been directionless for 70 to 80 years since the First World War. We drifted into one thing, drifted into another, drifted into the loss of empire, drifted into economic decline, drifted into becoming a satrapy of the United States, drifted into mass immigration. The Tories have done nothing to stop it. Churchill and all the others in the 50s could have reversed the social agenda of Labour post-45, 46, and they never did. All the Tories do is manage the decay a bit better, or at least think they do so. Look at comprehensive education. Introduced by leftists as an idealist system to get over the 11 plus and divisions, and all these poor people who failed it and all the rest of it, and what a monstrous nightmare the secondary moderns were. The secondary modern schools, which were schools of Tory neglect, because the Tories have never cared about working class people and never will, and their patriotism only extends to a proportion of the society. That's why the genuine right has a patriotic concern for the whole society. As Labour dies and collapses over 100 years after it was created, the Labour Representation Committee was set up by the unions in 1900. New forces are emerging. The reason why this party is loathed and hated by Labour, almost to a sort of rabid extent, is because it's the rival for working class votes, given that the left has betrayed the people it said that it represented for generation after generation. The Tories never cared what happened to the people at the bottom, and also at times they just left alone, because benign neglect was their essential viewpoint. Labour's intervened and made a mess of it on almost all fronts, doing it with a smile on their face and socialist dreams in their mind, but their views are incorrect on all areas. A couple of weeks ago, the Prime Minister's wife, Sarah Brown, attended the Gay Pride rally in the middle of London, and she marched along with a pink Union Jack. With a pink Union Jack. I mean, there is a sort of Monty Python element to it, isn't there? There is a degree to which you couldn't make it up, really. But this is what's going on. And that's just one, and not a particularly important issue anyway, but it's one of many, many issues whereby prior structures have been smashed to pieces and have done so deliberately in order to way for new fauna and flora. Look at many of our cities now. My mother was born in Manchester. This is very interesting what's happened to these great northern cities, and it's why there's a considerable vote for this political party. Centre of Manchester's blitzed. It was an industrial area, miles of plating. We built the Lancaster bomber there, and that sort of thing. There's nothing there now. Nothing there but blocks, immigrants. The middle class moved out to Cheshire about 25 years ago. A trash Labour authority dominates it. Progressive and trendy whites go back into the centre to fill the gap. In Manchester, you can have a man in a penthouse that's worth £1.5 million on the top of a block, and he looks down on a drug addict, on a stained mattress, shooting up heroin mainline, and he thinks it's all part of the funky deal. It's all part of the trendiness and the multicult that these people like to live amongst. In these areas, Rusholme, Whalley Range, Gorton, areas where ethnics are 70%, whites are 30%. The Curry Mile, it's called, out into Oldham, where many of our people have sort of dispersed, and then dispersed again, and then dispersed again. This is the model American cities have. This is why Obama has been elected. Many people in England, particularly those who don't go to the cities very often, scratched their heads and wondered why is there the first non-white president in the United States of America? Well, because the United States of America has changed out of all recognition. 70 million persons of colour have entered the United States of America since 1969. 70% of whites voted against Obama, but it increasingly doesn't matter, because 98% of blacks voted for Obama, but of course race had nothing to do with their electoral choice, and Latinos on the whole voted for him in a majoritarian way. With the minority of unionised and left liberal whites, he's in, with a relatively small majority, but he's in, primarily on economic issues. One of the ironies is some of his policies in relation to Iraq and so on are relatively sane, actually, but America is a foreign country. When September the 11th happened, Blair played the American national anthem at Buckingham Palace. But he's got the country wrong. We're not the United States. We're not the 51st state. We are an independent country. We ought to have an independent policy in all areas. It was very revealing to me that Cameron says everything can be cut. Defence can be cut. The Treasury budgets for health, for education can be cut. Health's going to be ring-fenced, but the thing that he was keenest of all to ring-fence was foreign aid. Foreign aid. He said, oh no, he said, we are globalists. He said, we have compassion for the third world and the poor. He's a new sort of lovey conservative, you see. He's trying to get as far away from Thatcher's legacy as he can. He said, we will preserve international aid. Why? Why do we need to preserve international aid? Why, apart from aiding troops of ours in the field, and the odd thing that is in a micro way, directly in our military and or diplomatic interests, why are we giving any foreign aid at all? Charity begins at home. All of that money should come back here and be used here. Cameron was instrumental in writing the last Tory manifesto. The last Tory manifesto had quite a lot in it, because it was designed to shore up their core vote, about immigration. Do you remember those big posters that the Tories had? It's not racist to be concerned about immigration. Somebody crept up to one that I saw with red paint and wrote, "Don't vote racist." But they misspelt racist, you see, so it's either a victim of comprehensive education or they'd been drinking beforehand. Cameron wrote that document for Howard. Remember Howard? Before all those changes to his conservatory on expenses and so on. He's going at the next election, but he wrote that document for Howard. But when Cameron became Tory leader, he was asked about immigration. He said, oh, it's not a problem. Not a problem. Not a problem. Well, he obviously doesn't live in some of the areas which I mentioned earlier on in this talk. Not a problem. He was asked about 6 months ago, and he said, oh, well, there's been too much of it. Oh, so there is a bit of a problem, isn't it? And he said, we will have a quota system. He said, a quota system. We will only allow in a top notch with the skills that are necessary. But we can't turn our backs on the rest of the world. Well, there's not much danger of turning one's backs on the rest of the world, is it? Because most of the rest of the world's living in South London at the present time. So there's not much a chance of turning one's back on it. It said that the Conservative Party threw the Union flag in the gutter, and the radical right in the 70s and thereafter had to get down into the gutter to take it up. And that's not always an present experience. But it is noticeable that in perspective of the majority of indigenous people, all of our major parties are semi-traitorous. All of them are unpatriotic, the odd individual excepted. Not the voters, not all of the members necessarily, but the clerisy, the elite. Those who run the BBC, those who run our universities, not those who run our military necessarily, those who are in the House of Commons, those who are in the House of Lords, those who are in the top of the civil service. Never mind all this nonsense about we mustn't politicise the civil service. If ever this party was elected to any governmental power, the civil service will be acting against it from day one. You'd have to get rid of quite a lot of them, replace them with other people of competence, and you would have to politicise them. This society needs more politicisation, not less. The laziness of many of our people that we can leave someone else to do it. It's summer, let's watch the cricket. You've got to get rid of that sort of idea if you want to retain your own country within the perspective of 50 to 100 years. If you don't want your children dragged into foreign wars, if you don't want to be a minority in your own street, if you want a school that means your children leave at 16 and are able to speak and write English grammatically and don't talk like a Jamaican gangster, you've got to vote for something different. If you want to roll back crime, if you want to end hundreds of thousands of abortions every year, if you want to be able to walk down to your shops without being worried about who you might meet on the way back, you should vote for a different dispensation of politics. If you want the murderers of baby P killed judicially through hanging, vote for a different type of politics. If you want to see the end of the stranglehold of new Labour, old Labour and newly repackaged Conservative, people have got to vote for a different type of politics. We'll take votes from all over. Many of our people have voted for different parties and tendencies all their lives, and deep down our people are very worried and very frightened. And these votes in the north of England are a manifestation of this. Our people have been left leaderless. The people they once looked to, the clever people, the people with the gift of the gab, the 10,000 that do the top jobs right at the top, these people have gone. They're part of a global and an international elite now. If you want Greenwich to change or to be different or to be better or to be a modern version of what it might have been like in the 50s without idealising that too much, you've got to move to a different political dispensation. It's begun with people who've been so manifestly betrayed by Labour they've got no alternative. Cruddis. Mr Cruddis,